Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 31st of January 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Patrick Henningsen. Welcome to the programme, Patrick.
It's great to be with you, Mike.
And by video link, we have Mark Anderson joining us today. Now, we're going to begin with the air crash in Washington, D.C. And the reason is because the BBC was pushing this out yesterday. This was the front page of the BBC website. Trump says cause of Washington, D.C. air crash. It left 67 dead is unknown. But then the subtext there says the president also suggested without evidence that diversity hiring policies in air traffic control could have been a factor. Well, first of all, is there a politician on the planet that doesn't say things without evidence, Patrick?
There's not, especially Donald Trump, but everybody should know that by now.
Absolutely. Now, but however, what this implies is that he was telling lies. That's certainly what the BBC is implying. But if we go across the Atlantic to ABC News, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer was accusing Trump of throwing out idle speculation without citing evidence. So here we've got this common narrative on both sides of the Atlantic again. But the question is, what actually happened? So to try to just explain this a little bit, let's bring up the air chart for the airport. Now, this is the helicopter chart in particular, and what you can see on there, the purple. You can see the three runways at the airport in the center with the green dot, but the purple lines around the place are routes for helicopters. So these are helicopter routes, and the helicopter that was involved in the crash was heading this direction here along Route 1 and onto Route 4. Now, the key point about this is that the maximum height that they should have been at was 200 feet. They should have been below that, and that would have taken them below the glide slope for the runways. The pilot had allowed the helicopter, though, to climb to at least 300 feet at the time of the accident. So that's one thing to note. The regional jet itself was originally intended to land on runway 1. Which is the one that heads north-south, basically. But he was asked by air traffic control if he could take runway 33 instead, and he agreed to do that and carry it out. What most of the qualified commentators that I've seen talking about this are calling a challenging approach. So, in other words, he was totally focused on that. ATC, the air traffic control, asked the helicopter pilot twice if he had the regional jet in sight, and each time the helicopter pilot asked for and was given visual separation clearance. In other words, it was the helicopter pilot's responsibility to maintain that clearance. Now, Trump said that the airplane was on a perfect and routine line of approach to the airport. The helicopter, he said, was going straight at the airplane for an extended period of time. It was a clear night. The lights on the plane were blazing. And Trump was asking, why didn't the helicopter go up or down or turn? Why didn't the control tower tell the helicopter what to do instead of asking if they saw the plane? That's a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. Not good. Now, the only good question in that comment from Trump was, why did the air traffic control leave it to the pilot to decide? Because the likelihood of error here was huge. Yeah. Flying at night over a city. It's one thing looking from the ground up at aircraft, you see all the big flashing lights and all this kind of thing. But when you're in the air and looking across at other aircraft, what you have is this landscape of lights from the city, which an aircraft will disappear into very, very easy. So the lights merge with the city. But even worse in this case, it's known that the helicopter pilots were using night vision goggles, which are great for landing in a dark field in the middle of nowhere, but it makes it even harder to distinguish another aircraft that's flying at the same time. But the worst part of this is the two aircraft were approaching each other for most of that time absolutely head on. So there's no relative motion or very little relative motion, which even makes it harder to recognize the danger that we're in. So the helicopter pilot undoubtedly should not have asked for and should not have been given clearance for visual separation under these circumstances. And the question is, why did that happen? And the issue does seem to be one of understaffing. And in fact, this has been commented on for a very long time now. So this is CNN from 2024, from May. FAA still short about 3,000 air traffic controllers, new federal numbers show. And the issue here is that the FAA began its DEI hiring program in 2014. Now, on the face of it, there doesn't seem to have been a marked increase in near misses or ground mishaps. And if you look at this article here, diversity in air traffic control, the figures seem to show that. But this is a complex issue. It takes time for the effects of a new hiring policy to take effect as long-serving staff retire gradually, and the influence of the younger new generation becomes greater. The shortage of staff may be manageable for a time, but probably not forever. I mean, I have to say, I do watch this, and in the last 12 months, there have been quite a number of near misses, which could be absolutely attributed down to shortage of staff, overwork, and so on. So I would suggest that Trump was absolutely right on this issue, that the BBC is absolutely wrong to be criticising. This is something that absolutely has to be considered. The question of why they're not, first of all, they're not able to recruit. And is that because they are busy trying to recruit from certain, with positive discrimination in mind, rather than finding the best people for the job?
Well, first of all, we have to just underline the fact that this is a fluke. If you look at the data over the long period of time, very rare air-to-air collisions in America, almost never.
Right.
In terms of fatalities for an air accident, that's also unusual. So just to be a devil's advocate, the other party is, I assume, military. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
So, and again, nobody's pointing the finger at any negligence or incompetence from the military pilots. That seems to be off limits and verboten in the conversation. Certainly that would put a lot of heat on the Pentagon at a time when their controversial defense secretary has just been confirmed, and they're hoping for, to no pun intended, a nice runway into the first term. And then this happens.
Right.
So I want to know, what the story is there, because if these are experienced pilots, they should know not to go above a 200-foot deck around Reagan Airport, which is really busy around there. So a lot of different questions there. But yeah, the diversity issue is big, especially after the LA fires. It became a front and center issue. So it's obviously part of the debate.
Absolutely. Now, let's stay in the United States. And of course, yesterday was a big day for confirmation hearings, Patrick. And we're going to kick off with Tulsi Gabbard. And the question of well, there were a number of questions came up during the hearing, but the question of chemical weapons in Syria was certainly one of the key ones. So let's just look at a quick piece of video from the hearings.
Can you explain to me then why you doubted the intelligence community's conclusions in these two cases, Duma and Kanche-Kun, but not the others? And please be specific.
These two cases were being looked at to be used as a pretext for major military movement, and my fear was a repeat of the deployment of another 500,000 soldiers like we saw in Iraq towards what was the Obama administration's goal, which was regime change in Syria. The question specifically that I raised around these two came about because there were two reasons. One, that assessment was made with high confidence and low information. The information that they had came from those on the ground in an al-Qaeda controlled area, and therefore were al-Qaeda linked sources. And there was conflicting information that came from the UN's Office on the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons inspectors, as well as an MIT professor, Ted Postel.
Now, Patrick, she mentioned the UN chemical weapons inspectors, the OPCW chemical weapons inspectors, but she didn't, at least I didn't notice her specifically use the word whistleblower. And she talked about dissent, but she didn't use that word whistleblower. And I think that puts an important context on this that was missing from her evidence there.
Definitely. It was a missed opportunity in terms of she didn't really get the full scope of the argument across. I mean, she has put it on the record. It's kind of on the radar, but the media aren't going to run with this at all.
Right.
They're just going to gloss over it. But it was nice to hear it at an official capacity, an official forum, that at least the issue was broached. And so that's positive. But I agree, Mike, very, very much a lost opportunity to really nail the point across. Is that really what she wanted to? Was she there to nail this point across, or was she just kind of squirming her way out of a difficult situation?
Do you think she's trying to walk a line with a view to actually getting confirmed rather than making points?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's undeniable. So it goes with the territory that some things aren't going to maybe be fleshed out as well as they should.
Yes.
This is unfortunate, but this is how Washington really works.
Well, she made a really important point during her opening statement, but before we get to that, I'll just mention that we have a new article up on the UK Column website by Dr. Piers Robinson. Why is this not working? Okay, so we do seem to have a problem there. So let's have a look. This is Homs 2012 and the genesis of the Syria chemical weapons narrative. This is going to be the first in a series of articles taking us through the stages of the chemical weapons narrative, and see if we can see what the get an idea of what the whole narrative is at the end of the day. But as I say, oh dear, we do have a technical problem here today. So let's just see if we can get this second clip running, and then we can see if we can sort it out. So Tulsi Gabbard then in her opening statement made a comment about intelligence.
To my husband, Abraham, my family, friends, fellow veterans, Medal of Honor recipients, and patriots, thank you for your love and support. I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted a few years ago, quote, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of Al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran.
So she's at least mentioning the intelligence failures, but did she go far enough?
No, I think, and this is an even bigger missed opportunity. And this is one of the big criticisms I have with Tulsi Gabbard, is that she's rightly pointing out, and Mike, that intelligence failures have dragged the U.S. and its allies into forever wars that were unnecessary, that have cost blood and treasure. I mean, we've heard that narrative before many times, right? Has that stopped any U.S. imperialist activity? It's arguable that it has, but maybe it has, who knows? But she's leaving out the most important point. And the most important point is, where is this bad intelligence coming from? Well, on almost every occasion, this bad intelligence is coming from our, quote, allies. And which allies in particular? Well, the Israelis and the UK.
Right.
Look at the yellow cake uranium.
So we're talking Richard Dearlove here and
Hannigan, Dearlove,
yes.
the yellow cake uranium, WMD thing. The British played a huge role in kicking the U.S. back into line on that. Not even talking about the Steele dossier and all this other stuff. But but here's the other thing. Ghouta. We don't talk about a chemical weapons attack in Syria. East Ghouta, August 2013. You remember it well. David Cameron brought the vote to the Commons. We nearly went to war over this. Who provided the key piece of intelligence, Mike? An intercepted phone call that created a narrative that Syria somehow launched a sarin attack while the UN weapons inspectors were rolling in at the invitation of the Syrian government. Well, that was Israel, wasn't it?
Yeah. That
was the Israelis. So my fear is that I think personally, Mike, that Tulsi has been groomed for this position at DNI. And the bad intelligence, she has not addressed the source of it. So we could see a situation where intel on Iran is pouring in from the usual suspects, And Tulsi Gabbard will feel compelled to brief the president, as the DNI is supposed to do, curate intelligence briefings from the different agencies, that this is a credible threat, Mr. President, and we need to act on it. Right. I think she has been groomed for this. And if you look at her turn towards Israel, especially after October 7th, she's very pro-Israeli. And we could show you some things, but that's my fear, is that she's known as an anti-war person. She's known as one of us in the truth community and so forth. But this is not the perfect person to break, but from the establishment. And to DC changes you. You don't change the swamp. The swamp changes you. I think this is a perfect example of that. This is my biggest concern with Tulsi.
Right, and you're talking about the lobby, and there it is.
Well, there it is. There's Rabbi Shmuley Botish and Miriam Adelson. And isn't it Thomas Massey said, everybody in Washington has an IPAC guy or a handler? Well, this is Tulsi, arguably early in her career, 2016 here, but they've had their eye on Tulsi Gabbard for a very long time, and her pivot to Fox News and her turn to become a Republican and all this process, she's become very pro-Israel and very anti-Muslim or anti-radical Islam and so forth. Plus, she has her, Iraq bona fides as serving in uniform. So she ticks a lot of boxes. But my question is, when it comes to the crunch, is she going to accept or reject intel coming from foreign intelligence services?
Assuming she's confirmed, only time will tell. But we can continue to discuss this. The other big confirmation hearing that was taking place yesterday as well was RFK Jr. One comment that he has made seems to have, at least one comment is making a lot of controversy. So let's just have a listen to what he said about Operation Warp Speed.
I do have a question for you on Project Warp Speed.
What I want to do is, I'm not a scientist. I want to empower scientists. I want to make sure that science is unobstructed by vested or economic interests.
That's good.
Or by bad culture. And I'll just say about Operation Warp Speed, it was an extraordinary accomplishment, demonstration of leadership by President Trump. When he promoted Operation Warp Speed, he was looking at all of the different remedies, including vaccines.
Therapeutics, everything.
Therapeutic, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, famotidine, even chlorine dioxide. And he was not looking at shutting down our country for the year, forcing people to wear masks for a year, forcing all social distancing that did not have any scientific basis, which Dr. Fauci has now acknowledged. He said, we took it out of thin air. But all of those changed during the Biden administration. And it became very narrowly focused. We ended up with the worst, the highest death count of any country in the world.
Is that true?
What, death count? Where do we start? COVID deaths? Is RFK really pushing that old chestnut? What COVID deaths?
Is it true that in practice, Warp Speed was about anything other than vaccines?
No, it was all about vaccines. It was all about vaccines. They commandeered the military to drive this massive deployment of experimental, highly dangerous and non-tested, non-safe, toxic shots. Period. End of story. I mean, how many times do we have to go through this? And RFK Jr., for political reasons, not to implicate his new boss, Donald Trump, he's backing off and saying what a great thing Operation Warp Speed is. His whole organization, Children's Health Defense, has spent the last 5 years practically just railing against Operation Warp Speed and the experimental COVID vaccines. And in one fell swoop, RFK has thrown Children's Health Defense under the bus and everybody working in that organization and mothers with children with autism. And the list goes on and on and on. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. How can you defend one of the worst crimes against humanity that maimed and killed countless people globally? How can you sit there and praise Operation Warp Speed? It's really unbelievable.
It didn't end there because we have a little bit more.
Secretary, would you recommend that parents get their children vaccinated against HEV?
I recommend that children follow the CDC schedule. And I will support the CDC schedule when I get in there, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed.
Would you recommend that parents get their children vaccinated against the measles? Yes or no?
Against measles? Yes.
Well, I just remind everybody that.
Okay. So Robert F. Kennedy, who's been campaigning against the childhood schedule for the longest time, says he now supports the childhood vaccine schedule. I mean, this guy is unbelievable. So he's capitulated to the establishment, to Big Pharma, in the most profound way. I mean, I can't believe I heard that from him especially. He could have said, oh, well, the childhood vaccine schedule needs to really be looked at. It is excessive. How many vaccines did Robert F. Kennedy have as a child? 3? Or something like that. I mean, he could talk to the boomers, Mike, right, and say, we're healthy. We only had 3. Why do these children need 60 or 70 vaccines before the age of 5? I mean, you could easily make that appeal, but he is afraid of not getting confirmed and being labeled an anti-vaxxer. So he has taken the middle of the road, halfway house position and basically thrown again mothers against children with autism under the bus and all these groups like that. So let's take a look, Mike, at the childhood vaccine schedule. It's important that people understand in the United States, especially, how aggressively this policy is pushed state to state and even at the federal level. I mean, there's so many of these lists. It's endless here. And so what I've done here is also compiled, Mike, from the Cleveland Clinic, which is a known pediatric authority in America. We just to give you a little taste of basically what's available on this particular childhood vaccine schedule, and it goes on and on and on. Newborn to 6 months, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 18 months, right up to the age of 16. Let's just take a look at it. I mean, it's just endless. This is the childhood vaccine schedule. This doesn't count the flu and the COVID shots, which are every year, the RSV shots that are every year up to the age of 5, practically. 11 to 12-year-olds, tetanus, repeat that again for the rest of your life, and so forth and so on. Okay, so in RFK, and all these previous statements about vaccine safety, all the virtue signaling has been tossed aside for the process of this public demonstration down on one knee to the pharmaceutical industry, basically. I mean, I don't really know what else to say on this, but I mean, it is quite shocking. Of all the issues he had to capitulate on, the childhood vaccine schedule, it is really beyond belief.
Okay, thank you. Now let me welcome Mark to the program then. And Mark, you want to look a bit more, or at least James Roguski has been given some commentary on Trump leaving the World Health Organization.
Yeah, good day, Patrick and Mike and listeners. The issue here in the general sense is looking at what Trump says he's going to do and then looking at the actual details. And of course, we're looking for relative consistency. And on Trump wanting to get the U.S. out of the World Health Organization, this is a recent AFP dispatch I wrote that's published only in hard copy. And on the surface, it appears, fairly sincere. There's this basic thrust that the World Health Organization is a tyrant or would be global tyrant and would be autocratic. And so, hey, let's get out of it. And on this slide, I'll note some things that are important. Let's put that up on the screen. Longtime WHO watchdog James Roguski lives in LA. Of course, he's been interviewed on UK Column, has been following every move of the WHO for over 3 years. He closely examined the WHO executive order, pardon the typo there, President Trump signed. Roguski said that a key word in the executive order is intends. And Section 2 of that EO says the United States intends to withdraw from the WHO. The Biden presidential letter to the Secretary General of the UN signed on 20 January 2021 that retracted the U.S.'s July 6, 2020 notification of withdrawal is revoked. Then it goes on, regarding Section 2's last part, Roguski responded, revoking Biden's revocation of Trump's 2020 exit WHO action is not ideal. Roguski added it'd be nice if a new clear letter could be sent directly to the WHO. And we'll go on and pick it apart a little bit more. Another important part of the WHO EO, the executive order in Section 4 states, while withdrawal is in progress, the Secretary of State, and then I added emphasis, will cease negotiations on the WHO pandemic agreement and the amendments to the international health regulations, and actions taken to effectuate such agreement and amendments will have no binding force on the U.S. But Roguski adroitly responded, there are no active negotiations regarding the international health regulations going on at this time. It's not happening, but the EO implies it is. This needs to be followed up with an official letter, Roguski says, revoking the amendments that were adopted by the World Health Assembly on June 1st, 2024, but that hasn't happened yet, as well as a revocation and notice to the world that the United States is also exiting the international health regulations altogether. So what Roguski is seeing, guys, is a lack of resoluteness in the wording in the executive order to actually get out of the WHO. It sounds tentative, the word intends, things like that. So the question very quickly becomes, is this just for show, or is it some tactical maneuver that Trump will get benefits out of later politically? As Patrick indicated, they write straight with crooked lines in D.C. There's a lot of maneuvering and jockeying that goes on due to the politics of the place and the corruption in the swamp. Anyway, we also have another matter, and that's the education department, which has long been a problem. Back in the 1950s, Rudolf Fleisch wrote a book called Why Johnny Can't Read, and that was due to the adoption of whole language, whole word techniques to teach kids how to read, which was a total failure rather than phonics. The alphabet is a phonetic system. It's based on sounding things out, so you have to teach reading through phonics. You learn to read so you can read to learn. That's the way education really advances. Anyway, this is another AFP dispatch. Trump looks to counter extreme left-wing bias at the education department. And this is true. He sees a lot of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies going on across the federal government, of course, but especially someplace like the Department of Education or DOE. And he wants to root that out. And that, of course, is welcome in many quarters. I'll go ahead and put this slide up. Ever since Donald Trump signed a flurry of executive orders on his first day in office, January 20, the Department of Education has been carrying out significant education-related changes. And that's the thing here. So far, there's no strong indication that they're going to get rid of the DOE. Rather, the DOE itself is calling out the DEI policies and wanting to root those out. So the DOE, Department of Education, is becoming activist here, acting more in concert with what Trump wants to do, rather than the Department of Education for now even being on the chopping block. That doesn't appear to be a current reality. Incidentally, the Department of Education has been around technically since 1867, just after the Civil War. It was reduced to a very small department after that. But then in the 1970s, during the Carter years, it was elevated to cabinet level status. Many true blue conservatives and Reaganites have been saying for years that they've been wanting to get rid of the Department of Education altogether. Nobody seems to be willing to pull the trigger. So then the question becomes, will Donald Trump finally, after all these years, technically going back to just after the Civil War, will he finally pull the trigger and get rid of the DOE? Well, anyway, we'll move on and show that for now, again, the Department of Education is taking an active role in carrying out Trump's policies rather than fading into the sunset. And here's some of the things that the DOE itself has been tasked to do. For instance, dissolve the Department of Education's own Diversity Inclusion Council. So it's dissolving one of its own councils, effective immediately. And Trump rescinded an Obama executive order that guided that council. And Trump issued a new EO, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing Also, we can go down that same list. Keep that up there if you would. Cancel ongoing DEI training and service contracts, which total over $2.6 million. The Department of Education would also place its career staff tasked with implementing the previous administration's DEI initiatives. They'd put them on paid administrative leave. And among other things, the Department of Education would remove more than 200 web pages from its own website that housed DEI resources and promoted harmful ideological programs. So the Department of Education is sort of making itself lean and mean, stripping a lot of DEI stuff out of its database, things like that. But for now, the Department of Education itself doesn't appear to be sunsetting. Rather, it's taking an active role in getting the DEI out of the system. So that, combined with Roguski's take on the WHO, shows that there's a lot of nuance involved. And at least for the time being, the World Health Organization and the Department of Education are not imminently threatened with being, in one case, dissolved, in the other case, the U.S. pulling out. It might take time. We'll see what happens. Is this double talk? Is this double speak? I don't know. But it's definitely the reality of Washington politics, as Patrick alluded to.
Yeah,
so back to you guys. Maybe you have some comments.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it looks like, he's done a lot to come in with a big bang with lots of executive orders, but maybe the wording of them leaves plenty of wriggle room for him not to follow through at the end of the day.
Look, all these departments, and by the way, if there was talking to the Reagan administration about getting rid of the Department of Education. So these are tools for any government coming in, and you can see the department itself, out of survival mode, has adopted all of Trump's policies because they don't want to be on the chopping block. But at the end of the day, it's a tool. And while they're removing all the radical left material out of the Department of Education, if Trump will put his people in, or these Republicans will put their people in, they could add things to the Department of Education to replace DEI, like a prayer and school board, a biblical council. They could bring in Mike Huckabee to review the Israeli Holocaust remembrance education curriculum for every student in America. It could easily swing the other way. And that's something I'd be very concerned about. I personally think, as Mark probably does, get rid of the whole department. It's a huge waste of money, along with a bunch of other federal departments. I'm not hearing that from Doge.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say,
unfortunately,
we'll sort that out. No?
So the psyop that is Doge, we can get into it another time.
Yeah.
But we're not hearing any of that. Like, let's just get rid of the Department of Homeland Security that didn't exist before 2002. What does it do? Nothing. What does it cost? Hundreds of billions. It's just one example.
Mark.
Yeah, well, the Department of Education, like so many things, the federal government is not authorized to be involved in education under the Constitution. A clean break with it would be best. I mean, if states want to put prayer in schools on a state by state or localized basis, that would be their business under the 10th Amendment. But the Department of Education, Charlotte Iserbyt, one of the longtime critics of the DOE, and she worked inside the Beast, and others, she's the late Charlotte Iserbyt. She passed away. She explained in very detailed terms why the Department of Education really isn't reformable and it really should be shut down.
Thank you for that, Mark. Okay, now look, we do have a technical issue, so I'm going to work my way through this as quickly as best we can today without disrupting the program too much. But anyway, if you like what the UK Column does, you'd like to support us, please go to support.ukcolumn.org. There are options to help us out there. You can make a donation. Now, please remember that if you do make a donation, rather than joining as a member, that doesn't give you access to the membership site and the UK Column News Extra and so on. So do join as a member if you'd like access to that. There are various membership levels there. You can pick something up at the UK Column shop. That helps us out greatly and helps get the word out about us. If you are into health products and you'd like to pick something up from clive2carl.com, you can do so through here as well, and we'll get a small proportion of the sale price. Now, if you can't do any of that, that's absolutely fine, but at least share the material if you possibly can on the various platforms, because we do continue to suffer from censorship regime and so on. Now, yesterday, the interview with with Raja Mia about Asian grooming gangs went out. It is on the website now if you'd like to go and look at it. It is a fantastic interview. Look at it if you possibly can. And we do have let me just see here. We do have a bit of an exclusive here, I suppose, for Monday's news program. In fact, it's more than suppose. So an unreliable witness. So Brian has a little bit of video here to show if this thing will even nearly work. Here we go. Let's have a listen to this.
Sometimes life throws something unexpected at you. It can be a letter, it can be a parcel, or it can be a chance phone call. And a few days ago, I received such a phone call from another journalist. The conversation we had took me back many years, to 2008, in fact, and to a story that I was covering at the time. But it was only later, when I dug deeper into the UK column files, that I realised the importance of a story that we covered many, many years ago. And I believe that that story is a significant part of the jigsaw in obtaining justice for Lucy Letby. So for our audience today and the wider audience for UK Column, please join us on Monday, the 3rd of February at 1 p.m, where we will be revealing what that case was, what our research was many years ago, and why we believe it holds a key part of the jigsaw for obtaining justice for Lucy Letby. Join us then. Thank you.
Okay, so do join us at 1 p.m. on Monday for during the news program, of course. But that is going to be an interesting exclusive. Now, let's move on to the European situation. And first of all, what we have here is the wonderful Ursula von der Leyen. So let's bring her on screen because she is, well, here she is with...
She's very important, Mike. She's got a lot of people around her.
She's got a lot of people around her, but one of the people is King Abdullah.
King Abdullah from Jordan, Lawrence of Belgravia.
Lawrence of Belgravia. So the European Commission, this is because the European Commission has signed a €3 billion deal with Jordan. On Wednesday, actually, this was. Ursula said, our financial and investment package of $3 billion reflects the urgency and scale of the challenge that Jordan faces as a region. And my question is, because this deal is all about, well, it's a mixture of loans and grants, first of all, but it's all about strengthening the Jordanian government support for its armed forces and, quotes, continue working on durable solutions for refugees, including complementary pathways for protection and safe and voluntary dignified returns. The question is this got anything to do with Trump's recent discussion on Gaza?
Well, I can tell you those dignified returns will not be Palestinians being allowed to return to their old homes, ancestral homes in Palestine. I think this is absolutely connected because what Trump did, listen, Mike, it's no secret. Donald Trump has a big mouth and stuff inadvertently always slips out, especially when he's doing these kind of casual, informal conversations. And I don't think he was supposed to say the word Jordan. It kind of came out very awkwardly. He talked about Egypt and then he said Jordan and then he does his sort of normal stumbling with a caveat. So I think he gave the game away. Donald Trump gave the game away. He gave the game away of the ethnic cleansing of the West Bank. So he has effectively already promised the West Bank or the annexation of the West Bank to the Israelis before. But to formally complete that process, you need to get rid of the problem. And as the Israelis, they need a final solution to the Palestinian problem. They need to get rid of the Palestinians in the West Bank, like they're doing in Gaza. And so this is what the radical right in Israel's talking about. This is what's being said in sort of muffled tones. And Trump just basically said the quiet part out loud. And now you can see the agenda is kind of coming open again. This has massive implications. I don't even know where to begin. On the Jordanian side, it could destabilize Jordan in a way that might end up pushing out the royal family. There's already huge protests in Jordan. I mean, it's a tinderbox already, and the royal family's position there has never been more tenuous in its history. And so what Trump is proposing there, I mean, it would just be who knows? It could cause a regime change type event in Jordan, Mike. And who would manage a regime change in Jordan? Let me guess.
Well, Trump.
It would have to be the Americans and the British, because Jordan is their colonial possession.
Right.
Full stop. So, and then Lawrence of Belgravia might end up in Belgravia after that. And who knows who will be the technocrat that they parachute in to create the new unity government whenever that happens. I mean, we're talking about these in theoretical terms, Mike, but if that happens and the West Bank people get pushed into Jordan, anything's possible at that point.
Indeed. Well, let's move on to Germany then. And overnight, there have been protests because of a deal that was done on Wednesday between the CDU and AFD. Now, the CDU has a protocol in place where they always said they would under no circumstances do any kind of deal with AFD in order to win a vote in the Bundestag. But in this case, they did do the deal. Well, lots of people have been very upset about that, including Olaf Scholz, including Angela Merkel, and so on. In fact, that was just a sort of intention on Wednesday. The actual legislation is supposed to come to the Bundestag today, so we'll see what happens. But lots of people complaining about this. But Elon Musk has been talking somewhat about the AfD as well, supporting them and whatnot.
Yeah, he has. I mean, just on what you just said, Mike, I wouldn't rule out the possibility of something really extraordinary in Germany, like maybe a coalition between the Christian Democrats and AfD.
Well, we should make the point that the Christian Democrats do find themselves in a very similar position in Germany as the Tories do in the UK. So Tories under pressure from reform snapping at their heels, AfD doing a very good job of snapping at the heels of the CDU as well. So yes, at least they have the opportunity of a coalition there. There's less chance of that in this country.
And it would allow them to retain the chancellorship as well.
Right.
And so, I mean, I wouldn't rule that out. But so what's Elon Musk's interest in Germany in the AfD? He's been deployed there. He sort of did this appearance, piped in here at their big rally. And the idea he's pushing here, that he was pushing, was interesting. He's saying, be proud to be German. He's already, reclaim your Germanness and so forth. And so this is kind of Elon Musk's kind of identitarianism that he's kind of running with, and he's trying to export this kind of right wing, or what he's calling conservative, but it's more than that. It's definitely nationalist themes that he is basically trafficking in. So it's interesting that he's pushing all the culture war issues, though, with Germany. Now, why is Germany unstable politically? Does it have anything to do with the fact that it's also unstable economically?
Right.
I think so. I mean, the German economy is in the toilet, proverbially, compared to where it normally is. Why is it in the toilet? So while Elon Musk, who is an employee of the U.S. government, I'm told now, he's an agent of the U.S., he's in Germany meddling in their elections.
Sorry, was this not something we were criticizing Russia for?
Oh, the Russians, yeah, but the Russians. So he's an American basically dangling money in front of political parties in Britain, in Germany, and other countries too. And he's telling them what they need to do. He's telling them how they need to feel. He's pushing the culture war issues. So he's pushing, obviously, emotive issues, immigration, grooming gangs in Britain, a German identity in the kind of white nationalist vein. Let's be honest. That's kind of where he's at on that. Okay. So all the culture war issues. But that's not what Germany's big problem is. Well, Germany's big problem is the sovereignty issue. And this is the one Elon Musk is not talking about, because Germany has been occupied militarily by the United States for decades now. Germany can't even decide what it can have in terms of its own foreign policy. The U.S. decides where Germany can buy its energy from. They're deciding who Germans can sell their products to. There's a sovereignty problem here. And Elon Musk is not talking about this. He is gaslighting. He's saying, look over here at these issues. We'll give you the culture war issues in America, but don't protest against us. And Germans should have got the message when the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up, okay? I mean, at that point, that's the wake-up call that should have happened. And is Elon Musk mentioned Nord Stream once? No.
No.
It is the single biggest consequential act of international terrorism in Europe in history. And you will not hear a guy like Elon Musk say a word about it, okay? So I'm questioning why he's been dispatched, who he's actually working for. And by the way, he's very chummy with the CEO of Axel Springer, that media group,
right,
which is very much in league with Israel. So Israel is backing the AfD in a huge, huge way. The Israeli lobby want the AfD in power. Is that why Elon was dispatched to work on Germany? This is an obvious question here. Or is he just doing this out of the kindness of his heart because he wants to de-woke the world? Personally, Mike, the woke issue has already been defeated. We're talking about the big boy issues now. This is the adults table: sovereignty, Brexit for Germany, NATO, U.S. military occupation, World War III. These are big issues. Elon Musk doesn't want to talk about any of them. So this is where I see this issue.
Okay, but where does that take us then?
Well, this is just an example of Germany real quickly. The U.S. and they've got Germany hooked on the Green New Deal. They got them to shut down their nuclear power plants, shut down their coal plants, and the U.S. can at any time pull out of the Paris Climate Accords. They can pull out of all these international climate regimes, and they just did. Look at this. And has Europe? No. So I'm beginning to feel like this has been a trap at the Trilateral Commission level, in the U.S. level, to lure the Europeans into this environmental boondoggle and then basically pull the rug out from under them. And isn't that not what's happened in the last couple of years? So, watch Trump, watch what he does.
Well, you mentioned Nord Stream, Patrick.
Well, speaking of Nord Stream, there are some interesting developments along this line here. We've got an exclusive, which I invite people to go read at 21stcenturywire.com. This is by Jeffrey Brodsky, who was on site. He did one of the first reconnaissances with underwater drones at the Nord Stream site, along with Eric Anderson, a great Scandinavian engineer. And so let's take a closer look at this story and see what might be here. So what is this about? Well, General Valery Zaluzhny, he's the former head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Ukraine's highest ranking military officer at the time of the Nord Stream attack, is currently the ambassador to the UK, is not immune from prosecution, say legal scholars, bringing to light a crucial omission in mainstream media reporting as new revelations reinforce the idea of a U.S. cover-up. So the point of this article, Mike, is that whether you believe this Ukrainian diver story or not, it has opened a potential can of worms diplomatically and legally. And we have to now revisit the whole issue of how and why Zaluzhny, of all people, a barroom brawler, was made Ukrainian ambassador to Britain. Let's just take a look at that for a moment here. This is a photograph. This is from the article itself. There's Zaluzhny there, I believe, at the embassy with his commission there. So did the British bring him in to protect him? Because he has immunity from prosecution as a diplomat, and he should be deposed in Germany. If they're running with this Ukrainian super soldier diver team story, the Andromeda yacht story, then Zaluzhny technically was the person who gave the order. So he would be the first one to be prosecuted, but you can't touch him because he's in London.
Right.
So, but there's legal loopholes to this story that actually he is not immune from prosecution. And this is a fantastic legal analysis by Jeffrey Brodsky that delves into 2 or 3 of these loopholes And we have international legal scholars that we've consulted for this story, and there seems to be a unanimous agreement that no, he's not immune from prosecution. I mean, this is potentially a uncomfortable little snag for Zaluzhny. That's whether you believe in the Ukrainian story, diver story or not, is beside the point. This is part of a bigger geopolitical chess match now.
Right.
So I find this to be incredibly interesting. So speaking of Nord Stream, now who's involved in Nord Stream? Does this have anything to do, this story, with Greenland? Just to remind people here, Donald Trump making the big play for Greenland. This is a Danish territory, autonomous region under the rule of Denmark, the Kingdom of Denmark. So what was this all about anyway? And you have to ask yourself, look at this picture here, Mike. Donald Trump is pushed hard right out of the gates, even before he was sworn in at Denmark, wanting to take Greenland. What was that about? Does Denmark have any leverage over Donald Trump in the United States? That's an interesting question, isn't it? Well, it just so happens 2 days ago, this announcement comes. Denmark is going to allow the Russians back into the pipeline. They just announced this 2 days ago, to work on plugging the leaks, the potential gas pockets in there. They're going to basically plug off the sides, but they're going to allow this team from Nord Stream Aggie 2, which is a division of Gazprom, which is listed in Switzerland, access to the area to do essential work for environmental safety reasons and so forth. The timing of this is extraordinary. Denmark.
Is there the opportunity for evidence gathering? A lot of time has gone past.
There's still quite from what you read in this article and from what I understand from this story, and reading some of the people who are Scandinavian journalists that are really on this story, there is quite a lot of evidence and data to be gathered still at the blast sites. And so what's interesting, this gets even more interesting here. This leads us to this story. And again, this is just today. Is Nord Stream 2 back in business? Well, what's this all about? Let's take a look. Is this going to... there's a permit that's been issued here. And so if you go to this article, which is right on our website at 21st Century Wire now, you'll see this is the Danish Energy Agency permit for work on the Nord Stream pipeline here. And if you go here, there is all of the information about the damage. Details that have not been seen before are in this. We translated it into English. There's a link to the original Danish version here. Intricate details of the blast site. And what's really interesting is the actual damage here. Look at this, how the pipeline, the dimensions, everything. So what you can, and what they're proposing is to use a remote vehicle to go with the diamond cutter to do the repair, to plug off the two ends, and then it may come back and rebuild the section in the future, possibly. But what you can do from this document, Mike, you can reverse engineer this operation by looking at the means and the methods and the technology that's available to fix it. You can kind of work out some of the unanswered questions about what was done and what technical equipment and remote vehicles could be used to actually do the job. And so this is stuff that is only really privy to people who work in the oil and gas industry. And this is a very difficult document to find. It's not in English. We managed to find it and translate it here. And we're sharing it with everybody at 21stcenturywire.com. So again, a hat tip to Freddie Ponton, a French journalist, for discovering this and sharing that with us on our website. So that's kind of an interesting thing, Mike. So this is all going on at the same time that this Greenland controversy. So has Denmark fired off a little quiet warning shot to Washington? We're just throwing that out there as a question. Could be, maybe it is, maybe it's not. And so there's a British angle to this, Mike. And, looking back at the Treaty of 1706, this is an article here at NPR. Well, actually, Britain has first dibs on Greenland. So if it comes to the crunch, we might, and you're going to like this. This is the old 1700 Union Jack. So this is actually Britain's to claim. If it's up for dibs, Britain has first dibs over the United States. So that's something, isn't it? So they could be flying the Union Jack in Greenland, not the American flag. Wouldn't that be something?
I'll believe that when I see it. But where does that take us then?
Well, just and the other point, and this is important, you heard about the funding being cut for Ukraine, and a lot of the funding was going to opposition media or pro-U.S. media through USAID. And I'm going to point to this great piece here by Kit Klarenberg, or a great thread, in fact, if you follow Kit on X. For those within the empire's inner core, the full seismic implications of Trump's aid suspension may not be fully obvious, but here in the Balkans, where USAID and National Endowment for Democracy has penetrated every sphere of public, political, and even daily life, the impact is absolutely monumental. So what he's done here is potentially pulled the plug on the whole soft power complex. Because whether you go to Bulgaria, Moldova, Ukraine, or in this case, the Balkans, as Kit's referring to, all of these media outlets that are supposedly independent are all being funded by the U.S. government. And those are all the regime change instruments in all of these countries to help spin up color revolutions and so forth. So all of that has been threatened inadvertently or not. Is this one of Trump's master plans, or did he make a mistake? Because they did rescind part of this order to revoke federal grants. It was immediately reversed after 48 hours. I don't know if Mark has any comment on that, but so there could be some confusion here. Somebody stepped on someone's toes in Washington, but the point that Kit Klarenberg has made here is that this money keeps this whole idea afloat of democracy promotion in all of these different countries. And when you pull the funding, all these people don't have jobs, basically. It's just an extraordinary story.
Any thoughts, Mark?
Not a great deal. I read up on Moldova.org just this morning, and I discovered in the process that Damon Wilson, formerly a big honcho at the Atlantic Council, which is basically NATO's intel arm, he's now with the National Endowment for Democracy, which, as Patrick mentioned, is kind of teamed up with U.S. aid, a longtime CIA asset. And so in the best scenario, they're pulling the plug on soft power, or at least reducing its influence. But as Patrick noted, there's other nuances involved, and we can't quite read the tea leaves yet, but it's an interesting development.
Yeah, let's keep an eye on this. This is an interesting thread story here that Kit's brought up. But go ahead.
Yes. Keep pulling the thread.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mark. Now let's just finish then with a section on the LA fires.
Yes. I'm happy to report that last night the Sonoma County Eagle Forum had a program, and they're really digging deep into the causes and nature of the fires. And it featured Robert Brame, a well-known arborist and mountain climber, and a contact of mine since 2008, Orleen Kurla, and she is a longtime president of the Eagle Forum of California. And it mentions here in this slide a little bit more about Brame. He's been a forensic arborist since 1975, so a very long time. Since the strange fires of Santa Rosa in 2017, he's been studying all of the unusual fires in California and their effects on trees and plants. Some of the trees burning from the inside out. I've written about that before. But outside, not even the leaves or pine needles are typically burnt. He's talking about these anomalies. And Orleen Kurla is a noted fire victim and author. She had her house destroyed or almost destroyed in a fire. And she's been fairly close up to these issues ever since then. She's dealt with the smart meter issue a little bit. So this was last night, and I sent a correspondent there. He goes by the name of Free Laser, and he is going to provide video and or still frame and a lot of notes and whatnot. He lives very close to where they had the program last night. And so this is really just a teaser about what's going to be coming up in the coming weeks on UK Column about this. And I'm working very hard to get firsthand photos and firsthand videos right from the grassroots so as to avoid any photo manipulation, Photoshop, video manipulation, things like that. So we get the most truthful picture possible. This next slide shows a photo that Orleen provided me, and that's the Santa Rosa where she lives, the wildfire, the aftermath in 2017, an absolute uniform burning of the houses. despite the differences in construction materials and things like that, and relatively few trees burned. And it's just way too neat and way too atypical of how fires actually burn. But after the program last night, we're going to hear much more about Santa Rosa and all the subsequent fires up to and including the present. And I believe we have a short video clip, if there's time, of Mr. Brame on a show not too long ago talking about some of these issues. And it just gives you a little taste of what's going on.
And all the homes are just gone, white ash, hardly any black showing. But yet what I saw was trees up and down every street and between houses. That doesn't work for an old mountain man like me. I've learned every tree in the state years ago, and I've had thousands of campfires. It doesn't matter what you put in a campfire. It burns in 1 minute, any needle, any leaf. So this didn't go well for me. And I went up there a couple of months later and walked every street I could for the whole day. And it was baffling. Nothing made sense to me. A year later, Paradise, California, I saw those pictures. This one also. 15,000 homes were just eliminated. White ash again with few metals. And there's the ponderosa pine, the #1 forest tree in California that burns more often than any other species. And by the way, there's 22 different species of pine in California. This is almost inhabits every life zone we have, from the coastal mountains to the intercoast range, the northern mountains, the entire Sierra Nevada, and the transverse range from Santa Barbara over to San Bernardino. We have them everywhere. They didn't want to burn that day or that month.
So that's just a sampling of what Mr. Brame spoke about in much more depth last night. And so stay tuned for a lot of in-depth analysis and original photos as much as possible on what's going on. And it'll look at the entire time frame from 2017 to the present. So lots of good stuff coming up.
Mark, thank you very much for that. Well, thank you, Patrick, as well. We do have to leave it there for today. We will be back in a few minutes if you are a UK Column member for some news extra. Join us for that. Stay around on the live stream if you're not. And you'll join us again on Monday if you possibly can. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. We'll see you then. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.